Hey, my name is Christine and I'm an adventure elopement photographer living in the Alps. And I am one half of the team over at Made in the Mountains Photo, with the other half of the team being Scott, my husband, who does videography. And I made this guide so that I could help walk you guys through some of the best places to think about eloping in Switzerland. While we do also shoot micro weddings, this primarily has an elopement focus, but there is some advice for micro wedding couples in here too. And I've created this video guide in a way that hopefully you'll be able to, one, follow along. I have an accompanying blog post that dives in depth into this. I've actually been meaning to create the video version for quite some time now. And I also hope that you'll be able to listen to this in almost like a podcast format. So even if you can't see everything on the screen, you should hopefully be able to easily follow along. So if you're just wanting to listen while you're doing the dishes or whatever other things keep you very busy, because we know so many of our couples are busy, this is a great place to start. And we're hoping that it helps give you a good jumping off point on where to begin thinking about eloping. The truth is, Switzerland is not a very big country, but there's so much to do in Switzerland, and trying to just narrow down regions or what type of vibe you're going through is really one of the first steps to thinking about your elopement experience. And as an elopement photographer, it's honestly one of the parts that makes me the most excited in the planning process. It's just where kind of all the magic comes together. So I'm really excited to help you guys out with that today. Okay, so as we begin diving into locations, one of the first areas that I want to touch around is all up around the northeastern part of Switzerland, which you can see kind of highlighted on this map up here. This is truly such a beautiful area, and I feel like really often gets overlooked when couples are thinking about their elopement. So I'm excited to touch on a few key regions that are up over here. The first location or region that I want to touch on in eastern Switzerland would be Appenzell. And Appenzell is kind of in like the northeastern corner. And honestly, if you're going for a location or area that just has like fairy tale-like scenery, it's really lush and green and just feels like classic Switzerland, like what you expect when you go to Switzerland, I would say that Appenzell is a really, really great area to start looking at. With that being said, just a note on accessibility for elopement locations in Appenzell is that pretty much every location in Appenzell requires some degree of hiking. There are cable cars, so a lot of locations can be accessed via cable car, but normally there is some like either light hike for like a few locations, but the majority are kind of on the more moderate side of things. But if you are down to hike, Appenzell is a super awesome place to go. And I normally recommend that couples think about eloping in Appenzell between the months of June and October. June's kind of hitting summer months. That's when peak wildflowers are, a time I really, really like. And then July is also nice too, especially if you want to get a little bit higher into the Alpine. And then as you begin to hit like early/mid-October, you're getting fall colors as well. I really like Appenzell because I think it's just a great alternative to more popular areas in central Switzerland. With that being said, it is becoming increasingly trafficked a little bit every year. So I do recommend kind of avoiding that peak summer season, which is like late July through August, or definitely keeping in mind, especially there, being very conscious of your elopement locations and working with someone local who can kind of help you navigate those things so that you can have a private experience if that's what you're looking for. It's also worth noting that Appenzell is located in one of Switzerland's most rainy regions, and while it's super duper beautiful here, even when the weather is moody, there are some trails that are definitely too dangerous to hike if it's been wet. And I would say honestly altogether, because this is such a cliffy area, you do have to choose wisely your location. So also just keep that in mind when you're working with someone, that they're aware of what those hazards are and can focus on you having a great experience and also staying safe while doing so. And then the other area that I want to talk about that's also in eastern Switzerland would be kind of like the Braunwald region. This is like near Appenzell. There's a lot of other like sub-regions as well, but I'm just going to call it Braunwald for now. This part of eastern Switzerland is also absolutely stunning. It's even less popular than Appenzell, and you once again get that classic Swiss scenery. Like when you think of Switzerland, Braunwald really sums up all of that. There's loads of alpine lakes, there's great wildflowers, you have those like green cliffy mountains. Braunwald is awesome. And I will say though, with Braunwald, kind of like Appenzell, is that some degree of moderate hiking is typically required to access a lot of locations in Braunwald, which is what helps it be a more off the beaten path destination. But if you are willing to hike, the rewards to elope in Braunwald are very, very high. You just get a little bit of everything there. Also in Braunwald, it's nice because like Appenzell, both of these locations are kind of in an area that tends to melt out just a little bit earlier in the season. So normally you can begin thinking about eloping there early to mid-June. Most locations are beginning to open up, and by the end of June, you can do just about anything in these regions, and then well into October. unlike more high altitude areas. I think one of the perks of Braunwald is not only is it equally stunning as a lot of the other popular areas, but it's largely overlooked by international tourists. And so I think it gives you that advantage of being able to do something that feels truly unique and doesn't feel cookie cutter, but also gives you just like all of the peak Swiss vibes. The next region that I want to talk about is kind of like two-ish regions. It's a really big area, but it would be southeastern Switzerland. And the two areas in there that I want to mention are one, Engadine St. Moritz. St. Moritz is one of my top 3 favorite regions in Switzerland. I'm just absolutely obsessed with it here. It is so, so beautiful, and I feel like photos really don't do this place justice. And I like St. Moritz because one, I think it's a destination that really well blends like luxury with adventure. There's a lot of super high-end places to stay, but there's also no shortage of like super awesome outdoor activities. You can mountaineer in St. Moritz. I'm not saying that you should necessarily do that for your elopement. If you want to, more power to you. Loads of cool hiking, paragliding, sailing, stargazing, cool mountain hotels to stay at. Like St. Moritz is just awesome. And I love also that in St. Moritz, while this photo doesn't show off that particular aspect, St. Moritz has absolutely massive mountains that are just like have huge glaciers towering down. And then there's so many alpine lakes in the valley too. St. Moritz definitely combines kind of like a mixture of rugged with the like other softer side of Switzerland too. And I really love that about this area. St. Moritz is a more high altitude location, so the best times of the year to get married there are typically mid-July-ish. Early July works too for some locations, but I'd say mid-July is safest, and then through October. And October is like an especially amazing time just because I don't know if you can see the trees in the background of this photo that I have pulled up. They're starting to turn yellow a little bit, but these are called larch trees. And so every year their pines turn from light green to yellow to a brilliant, brilliant orange, and they just cover the mountainsides in St. Moritz, and I love that about this area. And then St. Moritz is also a really great place to go if you love winter. It's actually I think one of the best places to get married in Switzerland if you're thinking of a winter elopement. One, they have some of the most reliable snow in Switzerland. Two, there's so many cool activities that you can do in St. Moritz, whether it's like literally groomed sledding runs all the way down mountainsides. They have tons of skiing there. The skiing is really affordable compared to the US. You can do dog sledding tours. There's snowmobiling just over the border in Italy. It's just all around an awesome place year round. St. Moritz definitely gets overlooked. It has just like a completely different vibe, I will say, of other regions like Lauterbrunnen. With that being said, you will not skimp on scenery if you think about eloping in St. Moritz. And then one other area that I want to touch on that's also in southern Switzerland would be Ticino area. Ticino is kind of interesting because Switzerland has quite a few different mishmash of languages and culture, everything going on, but Ticino is like the only completely Italian-speaking region within Switzerland. And Ticino is a little bit, it's very close to Como, and it has a very similar vibe there. You have palm trees and mountains and big blue lakes. Winters are a little bit milder here as well. With that being said, it still does get snow. And Ticino is also great if you're looking kind of for more a luxury type vibe. Locations in Ticino also range kind of from drive up to boat in to cable car rides. Ticino has private villas, stuff like that. So there are a lot of different options there, and it definitely still can be an adventure destination. And kind of the best times to go are anywhere from like April to October, depending on the region in Ticino that you're visiting. Kind of the most popular areas are Lake Lugano, which is Switzerland's version of Lake Como and really, really close to Como. And then also you have the Verzasca. I feel like I'm always botching that name because Italian is not my strong suit. But the Verzasca Valley is also there as well. And both those are really touristed places, but you do get that mix of soft scenery with big mountains, kind of a bit of everything in Ticino. The next region that I want to talk about is central Switzerland / kind of the Berner Oberland, Bernese Alps region, which is the most famous part of Switzerland and probably where you've seen the majority of photos done. Again, when you're just Googling stuff about Switzerland in general, this area is very, very famous for a reason. It is absolutely stunning, but there are definitely some things that you should know going into it if you're going to elope in this region. So kind of first up on the list here for the Bernese Alps is Interlaken. While you've been Googling where to go in Switzerland, Interlaken has most likely popped up in your search. Most couples don't actually directly elope in Interlaken, but instead they use it as a base to explore other nearby famous areas such as Lauterbrunnen and Grindelwald that are quite close by. And it is like a very bustling, well-connected town right in between two lakes, the Brinzersee and the Thunersee, which are absolutely stunning. Interlaken is a really nice place to stay, and everything there is really easy access either by driving, walking, nearby cable cars, and you have year-round accessibility there. It is worth noting that Interlaken is beautiful. It's also very touristy and crowded though. If you're looking for a quieter experience, I'd recommend looking into one of the nearby villages such as Wilderswil, which is quite cute as well. In general, though, the majority of eloping doesn't take place in Interlaken itself, although it is certainly possible, and there are some like castles and other stuff in the area here if you're considering a micro wedding. The next area that, like, if you have Googled Switzerland, this is the place, or one of two places that you've most likely seen would be the Lauterbrunnen Valley. Lauterbrunnen is super duper famous. It's one of the most popular destinations that you can visit in probably all of the Alps, especially with tourists. And what's kind of funny about Lauterbrunnen as well, it does drive a lot of international tourists. It's quite a bit more famous with those coming from like the US or parts of Asia. It's not as insanely touristed, I think, by other Europeans. Something cool about Lauterbrunnen is that it's home to 72 waterfalls. And within the valley, most locations for your elopement are accessed via a short walk. There are plenty of hikes though that lead from the local cable cars and everything like that. The best times of year to consider going to Lauterbrunnen for your elopement would be May through October for like summer, and then into fall, and then January and February for like wintry, snowy vibes. With that being said, sometimes Lauterbrunnen is not the most reliable with snow, and you need to go a bit higher up on one of the local cable cars to get that. Kind of like a lot of areas in the Bernese Alps, Lauterbrunnen is beautiful. It is very, very crowded though. And for example, like this viewpoint shown in the photo here, you actually often need to wait in a line to take that image. And also right now, this little cute church in the background, like all year it's had scaffolding all over it as they're doing construction. If you want to stop in Lauterbrunnen for your elopement, I'm definitely not, don't tell couples don't do that, but I wouldn't recommend allotting more than like 1 to 2 hours max there because one, the valley is quite small. Two, it is very busy and you'll gain a lot more privacy and seclusion exploring elsewhere. I don't typically recommend that couples have their ceremony here just because it is such a busy area. Another thing worth noting about Lauterbrunnen is that a lot of the land in the valley is private, and so you do need to coordinate with the farmers and get a permit from them to be able to work in those places. And that's, I think, been like a newer development overall the last few years as weddings and elopements in general have kind of blown up. The next area that outside of Lauterbrunnen you've probably heard of while you've been Googling Switzerland would be Grindelwald, which is also just like right nearby Lauterbrunnen. It's just on the other side of the mountains, like 25 minutes away. And some of Switzerland's most famous views are here. You definitely get the classic Swiss vibes of like flower-filled meadows, big mountains, glaciers cascading down, these wide valleys. Grindelwald is really, really stunning. And most locations for elopements are accessed by a cable car with either light or moderate hiking. Grindelwald has like an insane, just like extensive cable car and cogwheel train network. So it is very, very easy to get around the mountains, which is a huge perk just to this area in general. Although in general, the Alps are great at this. Best times of year to go are June through October. I really recommend for Grindelwald waiting towards like very late June though. I wouldn't do anything earlier than like probably the 20th of June, just based depending on snow every year. That does vary. And then December through February is great if you're interested in skiing. Like Lauterbrunnen, Grindelwald is extremely popular and crowded. So for a private experience, it's definitely possible to have that in this area. But one way that I really recommend doing that would be like an overnight elopement experience, which is something that we offer, which allows you to stay at one of the local mountain huts or hotels, and then get that like sunrise to sunset experience and be out after cable car hours and really be able to take advantage of things in privacy and peace. And I'll dive into that a little bit more later, but that's a teaser of kind of what's to come talking about locations here. Also, like in Lauterbrunnen, a lot of locations in the valley are private land that require getting a permit to photograph at by local farmers, and there are some restrictions on what you can do with that. The next place that I have to mention that you've also probably come across while researching things to do in Switzerland would be the Oeschinensee. And this one is actually a place that I'm only bringing up because it was one of Switzerland's most popular elopement locations for quite a while, and couples still regularly inquire with me about eloping at the Oeschinensee. With that being said, unfortunately back in 2024, there was a ban put on all commercial shooting at the Oeschinensee. Commercial shooting meaning any sort of paid work, and that includes weddings and elopements, even if it's an elopement with just the couple. So unfortunately due to that, they're making that push in part just because there's been mass over-tourism in this area and they're really trying to put a stop onto that. Well, that is not a place that I can shoot elopements anymore. There are so many other beautiful places beyond the Oeschinensee that you can definitely elope at. Another area that I don't hear talked about as much when it comes to elopements in this kind of central Switzerland, Berner Alps, Bernese Alps region would be Gstaad. And this area is also really cool, super beautiful. Something that I really like about Gstaad is, one, you have some like gorgeous waterfalls, you have loads of alpine lakes, you have like the sweeping grassy mountains, and then you also have just like big glaciers coming up in the back, tumbling over the mountains, and it's just green overall and fits that classic Swiss scenery vibe again. Gstaad also offers a mixture of luxury accommodation while still having a quaint feel in a lot of the surrounding villages. So even if you don't want to stay in like the ritzy part of town, there are a lot of great alternatives to still be in that region. And then most locations in this area are accessed via cable car with light to moderate hiking. The best time of year that I recommend typically going to Gstaad is, again, like July through October, that summer fall season, and then December through March for winter. And Gstaad is known for great skiing. There's just like, I think what I like about Gstaad is it still gives you a lot of that like classic, popular sort of scenery that draws a lot of people towards Switzerland, but with being able to avoid some of those like more touristed hotspots and having a more private experience, which I found a lot of couples really value, having privacy and seclusion during their day and not feeling like everyone is watching them. And then the last place on my list for central Switzerland, which I saved the best for last because just I'm absolutely obsessed with this area, would be around Engelberg, Switzerland, which is also part of the Bernese Alps, but you just don't have nearly as many crowds. While there's certainly tourist spots in Engelberg, there's so much stuff that just feels so much quieter and quaint, lots of little villages. The scenery is just out of this world. You have lush meadows, you have alpine lakes, glaciers. If you're really leaning towards wanting to have like an elopement in central Switzerland, don't sleep on Engelberg. It's just gorgeous. With that being said, for Engelberg, most locations are accessed via cable car and then include some degree of light or moderate hiking. There are definitely bigger hikes also available. Best time to go is normally like late June through October, depending on the location. And then again for winter, December through March, which there's also great skiing in this area. Engelberg is definitely a ski destination as well. Engelberg is, especially like I just want to put it out there, Engelberg is as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than Grindelwald in my mind. I think in part just because it does feel so much quieter there. And so if you want to elope somewhere that's just equally beautiful without all the crowds, definitely don't overlook thinking about eloping in Engelberg. And then the next region that I want to go into is Southwest Switzerland. Southwest Switzerland primarily covers the canton of Valais, and I love this area, so I'm going to dive kind of more into just some general information about that area and a couple areas that you might have heard of that kind of put it into perspective. But just in general for Valais, things I love about it, one, also worth noting because I have two spellings here, it is a mix of French and German speaking, so depending on what village you're in, literally like 10 minutes down the road they could be speaking one language like French, and then you go another 10 minutes and suddenly you're speaking German again, so it's quite a fun mix there. Highlights of this area though is that Valais has most of Switzerland's like biggest mountains and glaciers. Just the mountains feel huge. It honestly feels like a little Himalaya. That's the only way I can describe it. The first time that I went to Valais, it absolutely blew my mind. And for couples who really love like big mountains, this is the place to go. Just, it's so amazing. It is though one of those places that is a little bit more rugged and overall best for couples open to moderate hikes or bigger. It's just more rugged overall. There are definitely built up areas, but there's a lot more quietness too. I would say it just feels more remote in a lot of ways. Valais also is mostly made up of high altitude locations. So like really you're looking at eloping in Valais like somewhere between like early to mid-July through October, depending on the snow year. And then October, just like Engadine St. Moritz, is really great if you want those like mountainsides covered in autumn larches. This is one of those other places that you should definitely consider eloping at. And then December through March is great for skiing. Valais is also kind of like Engadine St. Moritz and like my top 3 favorite places to go in Switzerland. It's just incredibly breathtaking. There's still loads of flowers and greenery though. You kind of get the best of everything in my mind. I can't pick a top 3 favorite as in like which one's number 1, 2, and 3, but I would say probably Valais, St. Moritz, and like the Braunwald / Eastern Switzerland region are all like closely competing for one another. And then within Valais, you're going to find Zermatt. This is likely a place that you've heard of, or very possible at least, because this is home to the Matterhorn, which is pretty much one of the most well-known summits in the world, which you can see in this photo here. Zermatt is mostly made up of high alpine terrain and small lakes that have these like really cool reflections of the Matterhorn as well as a lot of the surrounding peaks. Something that I think a lot of people don't realize about Zermatt is that you don't just have this view of this one mountain, but literally in every single direction, you are surrounded by massive, huge summits. So it is a super duper scenic place. It's overall like a little bit more dry and rugged than places around like the Swiss Alps, for example, but it definitely in summer still can get really green and you have gorgeous flowers there as well. In Zermatt also, it's definitely one of the more friendly locations in Valais if you're looking for that big mountain scenery without a massive hike. Most locations here are accessed via cable car or cogwheel train and don't require very much hiking or like pretty much any at all, which is a nice thing. And the best times of year to go to Zermatt are between July and October, and then again from December to March for if you're looking for winter time skiing, all of that. Some things that are definitely worth knowing about Zermatt is that one, it's like probably the most expensive place to visit in Switzerland. I haven't been anywhere pricier than Zermatt yet. So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind if you're thinking about eloping in Zermatt. It is not a budget-friendly location. In general, Switzerland is one of the most expensive countries that you can visit, but Zermatt is definitely one of the most expensive places to visit or get married at in Switzerland. So definitely keep that in mind. Also, some of the best locations, or pretty much all the best locations to elope in Zermatt are at altitude. You pretty much always have to take a cable car up. There's not a lot that's like in the valley, which is quite tight and built up. And so in case there is like a lot of low clouds day after day, a lot of weather, stuff like that, it is a bit harder to pivot. It's not that it's impossible to pivot, but you will need to like leave the valley and go elsewhere, which can be a bit tedious, because that's another unique aspect of Zermatt is that you can't drive in and out of Zermatt. The only way to get there is from catching a train from Randa, which is like about 15 minutes away. It's not a big deal, but it's one of those things that just adds a little extra time to get in and out of the town. And then one of the last areas that I want to talk about here is going to be the Aletsch Arena, which is also part of Valais. This is again one of those places, if you want like big mountain views that are just super epic, this is another just incredible place to go. I know in this photo here it looks incredibly rugged, but despite that, there's also a lot of lush landscapes mixed in. And also right back here in this photo, you can see the Aletsch Glacier, which is actually Switzerland's largest glacier. At the Aletsch Arena, cable cars are pretty much required to access all the hiking trails. And then most of the viewpoints from there require a small to moderate hike. Overall though, it is pretty friendly to a lot of different ability levels, so you can just get amazing views. Best time of year is definitely like July through September. It is high altitude again, and then winter is nice if you want to ski, but if you're like really looking for this epic glacier view, I wouldn't recommend going to the Aletsch Arena because it's pretty much all buried in snow during the winter time. Another cool thing about the Aletsch Arena is because it's like kind of the best way to describe it is it's like a series of villages on this mountainside that are all accessed via cable car. And in these little villages, there's some different mountain hotels. There's even like a little villa. And these are super cool places to stay overnight if you're wanting like a cool, unique overnight adventure up there. A couple other things to think about as you're considering where to elope in Switzerland and kind of getting a general idea of things. Something that a lot of people overlook are the mountain passes in Switzerland, and I love mountain passes because one, you have easy access to just like out of this world scenery that isn't tied to cable car operating hours. Most locations in Switzerland and in the Alps in general rely on cable car access, which is normally like 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. So especially during the summertime, you can't catch sunrise or sunset unless you're willing to do a really big hike or stay in a hut, which we'll get into. So anyways, mountain passes kind of like get rid of that challenge and allow you to access a lot more types of scenery at all times of day. Also, they're generally better if you're looking for privacy and seclusion. There's some amazing easy access spots that are up on these mountain passes where it's like 15-20 minutes of walking can get you just the most incredible place to say your vows. I cannot recommend mountain passes enough. I'm obsessed with them. Best times of year is normally like very late June at the earliest through October. If there is snow, most of the mountain passes are closing down, so all the winter months are closed. Late June is when the vast majority begin to open up, so like very, very end of June / beginning of July is kind of the safest time to start planning an elopement if you want to utilize the mountain passes. I also want to touch on like a few things that people don't tend to realize with the mountain passes is that I think when a lot of couples look up pictures, even like this one here that I have, which was off of a mountain pass, the scenery looks really rugged and gray and a lot less green than some of those like lower altitude spots that I've showed. But the mountain passes normally have a really nice mix actually of greenery too. And so like to get to this spot shown here, we first hiked through these beautiful lush meadows and then came to this super rocky glacial lake. And you can see this glacier here in the background, and parts of it were breaking off into the lake, and it was so epic. Like, I don't know how to express enough that while I think what we see online of Switzerland paints one picture, there's this whole other side of Switzerland that you can experience that is very much still Switzerland. And I think the mountain passes often show that off in a really cool and beautiful way. Kind of one downside worth noting to mountain passes is that because they're higher altitude, low clouds and fog aren't super uncommon. So if you're looking for like the best chance of weather, sunrise is a really good time to think about. And we tend to give our couples flexibility on that too. It's like, well, sunrise versus sunset, you know, we'll keep both open obviously and see what happens there. And also some of the passes are just like a little bit more remote feeling for Switzerland. They maybe aren't always as well connected to bigger times, which can lead to longer driving times. With that being said, a lot of these mountain passes do have like multiple hotels at the very top of them, and some of them are super cool and unique. So you can still stay close to your elopement location and also have a cool place to stay, even if you're in one of these like more remote feeling areas. And then I also want to touch on berg hotels and mountain huts, which I've mentioned just a little bit in passing. And so number one, what are they? Berg hotels are hotels basically that are just located up in the mountains, generally accessed via cable car. And then the mountain huts are like little cabin sort of places typically that are located in the mountains, and they're run either privately or they could be run by one of the local alpine clubs. And despite the word hut, which I feel like is very deceptive, these huts can be anywhere from rustic to actually quite luxurious. Lots of the huts now have double rooms that you might be able to book one of the private bathroom like within your room. You have running water. They might serve multi-course meals. Like, there's truly something for everyone, no matter like what comfort level you prefer. The mountain huts are such a cool experience. I definitely think that everyone should have that opportunity at least once when they visit the Alps. And kind of like I mentioned, in terms of accessibility, they're everything from cable car accessible to hike-in only locations. And some of the perks of staying at a hut is, one, it's just a unique experience that I don't feel like you get in a lot of parts of the world, especially not the way they do them out here. Two, the scenery is just absolutely spectacular. Three, it's a great way to privately enjoy sunrise or sunset in the mountains, because the only people that might also be in that general vicinity typically at sunrise or sunset are going to be other people who stayed in the hut. So it's very easy to have a quiet experience in a place that is otherwise super busy during the day. And then also, if you want to see the night sky, weather permitting, of course, great. There's just awesome stargazing potential out here. I really love the Alps in general because I feel like even in the worst, quote unquote, like light pollution areas, you can still very visibly see the Milky Way. So that's also just a one of a kind experience out here. And then a few other things to think about here in terms of wedding venues. If you're thinking of holding a micro wedding or just an elopement and bringing along a few guests, some things to think about is, one, do you need a venue for your elopement or micro wedding? I typically suggest that couples with fewer than 8 people involved generally don't need to book a venue to hold their ceremony at, but if you have a party of 8 or more, or you plan on setting up chairs and decorations, you should definitely look into securing a small venue. One benefit of the Alps in general, not just in Switzerland, is that there are lots of small wedding venues available that are perfect for micro weddings with 8 to 15 people or more. And then the venues can include anything from castles to quaint chalets. We've seen drive-up venues, cable car accessible, and hike-in only spots. There's truly something for everyone. And in terms of costs, things to think about is that this really widely varies on the place. You can typically expect anywhere from like 3,000 to 6,000 francs for a few hour rental. That might include basic setup, drinks, post-ceremony appetizers. They also can get much more expensive though, talking 20,000 plus franc, and that would be like a huge complete private rental of everything. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're bringing guests to Switzerland, is that it's quite a bit more expensive here than in other places. For example, in a lot of like Germany, Austria, Italy, you can do something for, you know, like 1,000 to 2,000 euros. And the euro and the franc are close enough in terms of conversions. I'm just going to use those interchangeably there. Other things to think about here. One, if you're wondering about like permits, rules, restrictions, what do you have to worry about with that? Do you need a permit for your elopement location? Generally, no. You can elope at most locations in the Alps freely, but in some parts of Switzerland, especially around like Lauterbrunnen, Grindelwald, or these other like kind of high traffic areas, I am seeing increasingly that you do need permission from the local farmers and will have to pay a fee to use the land, and you're gonna be locked into a time slot. this is something that I do help my couples navigate should they want to incorporate one of those locations into their experience. Also, are you wondering at all about drone restrictions, anything like that, especially if you have a videographer? That's really important. There are quite a few no-fly zones in Switzerland regarding drones, and those are also most typically seen in hotspot areas and nature-protected zones. I always recommend choosing a videographer who can make a great film regardless of if there's drone photography, videography in there, so you can put your focus on selecting a location that's based on the scenery you want, the accessibility, and the privacy first. I think all those things will matter so much more to you the day of typically, and there's still a lot that can be done to incorporate a great film into your day without having a drone involved. And then if you're wondering, after hearing all of this, because I've just like barely scratched the surface, kind of wondering where should I even consider eloping, here's like a few kind of roundups for you. One, if you want big mountain views, I would highly recommend considering areas like Engadine, St. Moritz, and then all over in the Valais region. Here's some other towns that I can highly recommend too. Just giving you that big mountain scenery for sure. If you're looking for that classic Swiss scenery vibe that has a lot of greenery, everything just feels a little bit softer overall. You might get those green cliffy mountains, stuff like that. I'd highly recommend Appenzell, Braunwald around Valais, Engelberg, Gstaad, Grindelwald. These areas all have that, and even in some of those more hotspot areas, there are ways to still incorporate a private experience, typically through staying overnight at a hut or being willing to like hike a little bit further. If you just really want the Instagram hotspot view, these are the places that provide that. You have Lauterbrunnen, you have Grindelwald again, Oeschinensee, which honestly I'm only mentioning for like search engine optimization purposes. You cannot currently elope there. Interlaken, Lucerne, and then around the Matterhorn and Zermatt, and all of these places, it is also possible to have privacy and seclusion, whether it's renting farmland from one of the local farmers, again, incorporating a mountain hut into experience. There are ways to still have a private experience at these places. It's just really important to like set expectations early on of like, what special things you need to take into account to make that happen. If after listening to all of this, you're just wondering where in the world to even begin, don't worry, I've got you covered. I know it can feel really intimidating at the start of planning your elopement to figure out where to elope, when do I want to elope, and all these other nitty-gritty details. And so one, in the description of this video, you're going to be able to find a link to the accompanying blog post with all this information. Two, if you want to get in touch, you are always welcome to. I'm more than happy to schedule a free consultation call with you where we can go over on a call together, starting to dive into those questions that you have about just understanding how it all works. I know that coming from abroad, which is pretty much like 99% of the couples I work with, are traveling from abroad to get married in the Alps. And I know that that can feel really intimidating at first. And my goal as a local here is to make it as easy as possible for you. So you aren't wondering, what in the world do I need to do? Or I don't know about this or that, and you don't have to rely also on places like Instagram or TikTok, which show a very small picture of kind of the reality of getting married in these places or what that looks like. And so I'm here to guide you every single step of the way through that. And if you want help nailing down a nitty-gritty location, that's something that I help all of our book couples with, because this list that we've gone through just begins to like scratch the surface of all of the like actual places that you can get married in Switzerland. And I have so many places up my sleeve that I reserve, especially for my book couples, that you aren't going to find anywhere else. And I love helping couples find those unique, one-of-a-kind places where they can truly just celebrate their wedding day and have an unforgettable, awe-inspiring experience out here. So if you're looking to get started with that, feel free to hit the link in the description below, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.